welcome back to my channel. If you are new here and like the video, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button for more content. Thank you for watching. And with that, before you watch this, please know that this is a continuation of the BOKUAKAKUROKEN Memory Loss Prank. If you have not seen that, I do highly recommend that you watch them, or else this will not make sense whatsoever. I will put the link in the description for both parts of the memory loss prank. Now let's go ahead and get to this. Being back in the comforts of home, Koro was able to be flexible with making sure Bokuto actually sat still so he could recover, help Akashi regain his memories, which wasn't that hard, thankfully, and be there for Kima, who seemed to take it the hardest. He didn't know how he was the only one of them not to get either injured or traumatized, but he truly wished that he could carry all of his boyfriend's burden so that they wouldn't be hurt. Taking care of them was the least he could do. Come on, Go. You got to sit still. Bokuto refused to do such a thing, and rather seemed to put up more of a fight. No, I need to help them. Kurt sighed. He's been like this ever since he found out that the doctor was a hater out for Kima and seeing both of their lovers in that state. He hated feeling so weak, pathetic, and of no use. He didn't want to sit still when both Akashi and Kima still needed him. In order to make the ace listen to reason, he would need to compromise with him. Like this, he wouldn't get anywhere with him. Kura crawled into the bed next to Bokuto and draped his arm on the top of the owl's chest, careful not to touch his shoulder. Tatsu. Finally laying down, the exhaustion hit him like a brick thrown at Mach speed. He mindlessly began running his fingers through Bokuto's bi-colored hair with his day-old gel seeming to be warmed out to almost nothing. We can't do much for them. We just have to be there. There won't be any helping if you strain yourself anymore. He sniffled, the situation finally weighing down on him. Don't push yourself. Don't hurt yourself anymore. This definitely wasn't the ideal way to spend their Christmas break. Bokuto moved his only good arm onto the top of the ladder's back and rubbed it up and down, with his heart aching, feeling and hearing the slight trembled racking of his body. He understood that the rooster wanted to be quiet so that the people that needed him to stay strong the most wouldn't hear him at his weakest. I don't think I can bear seeing any of you getting hurt anymore. His voice cracked, sending waves of anguish through Bokuto. It hurt far more than any of his injuries, and even if the bullet fully pierced him. The ace sucked in the breath, feeling his shirt get damp from the captain's silent but sorrowful tears. Immediately, Bokuto pulled his lover's face up and saw the damage that he had done. Tears and snot ran down his face, and he had this unexplainable pain expression that shattered his heart into nearly a million pieces. No, don't cry. He rubbed his calloused thumb over the taller's cheek, wiping his damp face. This was less of a compromise and more of an unintentional breakdown. But either works. Under the owl's soft and gentle touch, and the 2 long days prior, he felt himself dozing off. Please, just sleep. Bokuto relished seeing his distressed lover finally asleep, almost scared that this would turn into something more, something he didn't want to see. I'm sorry for worrying you. He laid his back onto his pillow, trying his best attempt at his boyfriend's wish, knowing that he was right. He wouldn't do anyone good by being any more injured than he already is. It just infuriates him that he couldn't do anything in the end. It didn't take too much longer before he fell asleep as well, with the uneasiness still lurking on his conscience. Hot and cold flashes erupted throughout his entire body, with his stomach began churning, trying to turn it from inside out. The setter's head was spinning like the earth itself rotated on its axis 1 billion times faster than usual. Nausea inflamed his stomach and throat, wanting nothing more than to calm down. His blonde locks were glued to his damp forehead, puffing in air that seemed to be too thin. His bare back was laid out onto the cold tile floors of the bathroom, desperate to feel some sort of relief, but the throb in his side only increased. He leaned over the toilet gagging before he threw up yesterday's lunch before he collapsed back onto the floor. It hurt so much. At this point, losing consciousness would be much preferable than whatever this was. He glanced down at his side that glass had previously pierced through his delicate skin from the dumpster whenever both he and Akashi were running. Not only had the surrounding skin turned into a mixture of red and purple, the tiny cuts that, more than likely, still contained fragments of glass also was tainted with a deep yellow in the cuts. Every time he moved his torso, even the slightest, his nerves and tendons would inflame and his cuts would ooze that sickening color. No matter how much it hurt, or how ill he felt, he couldn't let his boyfriends know. Just keep it in for a little longer. There was a knock at the door. Kimma's breath hitched, already reaching for his shirt and crawling onto his feet hunched over the sink. Kenma? Shit. He turned on the faucet and ran his head under it, ridding him of sweat and hopefully cooling the aching fever that his body wanted to succumb to. Yeah. His voice was hoarse and raspy from his illness that made him appear more hollow by the second. You've been in the bathroom for a while. Is everything alright? Even with Akashi lacking some memories, he was as observant as ever. Kimma turned off the water and opened the door, revealing him with damp hair and flushed face. Yeah, I'm fine. I was just washing my face and accidentally ended up taking a whole shower in the sink. He laughed at his lousy attempt of lying. He never was a good liar. He was absolutely terrible. Luckily, the Raven never knew that, so maybe he could get away with it. He was interrupted with the smeller's phone ringing. He pulled it from his pocket, examining the contact name. Excuse me, it's my mom. Akashi nodded his head, letting the blonde walk past him for some privacy with his phone call. Hello? Hello, sweetie. How are you doing? I'm doing alright. Now, the problem here is even if his mother's memories were wiped entirely, she could easily read through him. Call it mother's intuition if you must. A mother's instincts are like no other. Alright, spill the beans. What are you talking about? Kenma? He heard a sigh. How are my son-in-laws doing at least? Kenma slightly flushed, internally grateful that his mother saw his lovers that way. He didn't know what he would do if his mothers didn't accept him. Much better. Keiji seems to be slowly regaining his memory, and Ko and Tatsu are resting. That's good to hear. Kenma, honey, do you trust them? The question caught him off guard. Of course I do. Listen, I know something is wrong and bothering you. I'm not going to pressure you to say anything to me. At least tell one of them. Kenma sighed, feeling his head wanting to pound against his skull. I can't. You can, you just don't want to. You think that whatever problems you face is just a burden to them. Damn, she really read him like a book. They love you, and because they love you, they will accept you for who you are, problems and all. If they truly love you, they will help you solve those problems. I know those boys. They love you. The setter got frustrated at how his mother was actually making sense and thinking rationally. The fever made him incapable of doing so. Fine, I'll tell them. His condition was starting to become unbearable for him anyways. Plus, he did make a promise to the Raven that he would tell someone. It's funny how it took a fever and a lecture from his mother to realize. Man, he really was an idiot. He should have told someone once his fever emerged, or maybe when his cuts were mingling with infection. That should have been his sign, but he ignored it. Some things are learned the hard way, and that is something Kenma will have to find out. Good. I'll talk to you later, sweetie. Kenma chuckled. Okay, bye, Mom. Oh, and Ken? The blonde hummed. I'm proud of you. For doing the right thing. Remember, your health comes first. I will. The phone beeped, saying that the call ended. He sadly smiled, thanking anyone that was listening for having her as his mother. He couldn't have hoped for anything better. He stood up to find one of his boyfriends, but never made it past the first step. He lost all sense of direction, not knowing which way was up or down, but just felt himself falling. His throat was closing up, not able to suck in any air like his lungs so desperately wanting. A crimson red escaped through his lips with his vision hazing in and out. He reached for his phone that skidded a few feet from him before, but the darkness took over. Akashi peeked through the bedroom door, seeing both Bokuto and Koto happily snoozing. While his memory was still lacking, seeing them asleep after those extreme events made him happy. They deserved the rest. Sometimes he truly hated his crappy memory. He had these sudden urges to run into his lover's arms, but never could because he couldn't remember the comfort, just the touch. The soft, gentle touch still lingered on his skin, leaving goosebumps in its wake. Sleep well. He closed the door quietly, without making a noise, not wanting to wake up the captains. He sighed, thinking about the blonde setter. While he did promise that he would keep quiet, his concern only grew, especially realizing that the smaller never really planned on telling anyone. He knew this, and yet, he didn't know what he should do. His behavior was just as concerning, more so than Bokuto's constant restlessness. His head was spinning at the thoughts swarming in his head like a pestering beehive. If he remembered, then he would know what to do. He paused, staring down the narrow, dark hallway of Koto's house. Once this hallway had many nostalgic memories of them goofing around and laughing. Now it was a dull reminder of what was lost. While his memory was healing, he still felt this emptiness, like he should know something that he can't recall. No. This was pathetic. He shouldn't be making excuses like he would know what to do if he had his memories. It was common sense to help him, even if he doesn't remember and the latter didn't want his help. He was hurting, and it wasn't something that he could ignore any longer. Forgive me for breaking our promise. He turned on his heel to talk to the blonde when he heard a loud thump coming from the living room. He felt the air freeze, and time stopped for a moment, already thinking of the worst-case scenarios and what that meant. He took slow and cautious steps towards the living room, almost scared at what he might find. Maybe he's just overreacting, and he'll see Kenma leaning down, picking up a book that fell off a bookcase. But the deepest parts in his mind told him that that noise was not the one of a book falling. He knew what it was. He turned the corner and sucked in a breath, staring in wide horror of Kenma's state. He ran towards the smaller, diving onto his knees. Kenma? Hey, Kenma, wake up. This isn't funny. He glanced at the setter's limp arm reaching for a phone. He jumped into action, calling for an ambulance. He lifted his shirt that was staining with a mix of red, yellow, and even black. Underneath his clothing churned the raven's stomach, suddenly feeling nauseous himself. You fucking idiot! Why didn't you say anything? He didn't know what to do. He called for an ambulance, but what's next? What can he do? His mind flashed to Koto and Bokuto. They were asleep, and while he didn't want to wake them up, he didn't know what else to do. He stood up and ran to the bedroom, forgetting all about his previous attempts at being quiet, and swung the bedroom door open. Kuro immediately shot his head up from the owl's chest and glanced at the panicked stutter. Keiji? His voice was raspy from his slumber, but he got up, which made Bokuto wake up, and approached Keiji, who was practically shaking like a leaf. Keiji, what's wrong? The promise. I'm sorry. Whoa, calm down. What happened? Bokuto was up now, sharing an equally fearful look for the setter. Not able to produce the right words, he linked his hand with the Raven Captain and dragged him towards the living room with Bokuto close on their tails. What are you... A gasp slipped from his lips, seeing Kenma on the floor. Kenma? I already called for help. What happened? Akashi leaned down and lifted the smallest shirt, revealing his injury. What is... It was the glass from the dumpster. He promised he would tell someone, but... Bokuto went to the kitchen, grabbing towels with warm water. His skin is hot to the touch. It's been like this for 2 days. All of his mother's stories as a doctor came flooding back to him. No matter how many times he tried to find a different diagnosis, he couldn't. This isn't good. How long ago was the call? Just before I woke you up. Could have cursed. What is it? Could have grabbed a towel and placed it over Kenma's sweaty head and took another look over the wound. Tetanus. There's no doubt about it. Akashi sucked in another breath. He knew full well that tetanus was fatal if not treated. He had been like this for 2 days? How could he even still be alive? If he had told someone sooner, he could have prevented this. He was such an idiot. Such a fucking idiot. He was so caught up in his thoughts, he didn't hear the sirens fastly approaching or feel Bokuto pull him back from his grasp on Kenma. Everything was blank and numb. The only thing he knew for sure was that he was a failure. He failed to protect his lover. He remembered. Bokuto was pacing back and forth, finding his sling rather annoying at the moment. He didn't expect to come back to the hospital, let alone this soon. Couldn't they ever just catch a break? This sure was one hell of a Christmas. I'm going to get some coffee. Do you want anything? He asked his 2 lovers. Coffee, please. I'll take a tea if they have any. Bokuto smiled, walking away to the dining area of the hospital, placing his order. Are you Bokuto Kotaro? Bokuto turned his head and saw an officer. Yes, that is me. Thinking now, he might have spoken too soon about catching a break. I was going to call, but seemed fortunate enough to catch you in person. Bokuto raised his eyebrow, suddenly feeling very nervous, not because he was in the presence of an officer, but because he knew that he came bearing news. Is this about Keiji? Or Kenma? Neither, actually. Bokuto grabbed his tray of coffees and tea, thankful that there was a tray because he didn't think about grabbing 3 drinks with only one hand. The captain sat down with the officer in front of him. Sato Daisuke has escaped. Bokuto paused. Sato? Was that the criminal's name? He never once bothered trying to learn the guy's name. What do you mean he escaped? His voice grew dark. How could they let the bastard that hurt Keiji and Kemma go? He was blistering in rage. A hellacious fire boiled in his blood. I'm sorry, sir. We were doing our best to get our hands back on him. Well, it isn't enough. You shouldn't have taken your eyes off of him in the first place. He snapped, sinking into his seat in a futile attempt to calm down. How long has he been out? He got out last night, shortly before we did our rounds. Bokuto clenched his fist tightly, carving imprints of crescent moons onto the palm of his hands, and his knuckles turning into a snow white. We will get him back. I do suggest laying low in the meantime. The officer stood up, leaving the ace to his thoughts. Daisuke got out. The same man that tried to kill Kemma and almost kill Akashi. He was on the loose. He could very well be in the hospital right now, lurking in the shadows, and he wouldn't even know it. He felt paranoid at the thought that the same man could easily kill his lovers. He stood up with a tray of beverages in hand and hastily marched towards his two lovers to let them know. Ko, Kemma is awake! They were both smiling and letting tears of joy and happiness stream down their cheeks. He couldn't destroy that. Not yet. His lovers had been through too much. He couldn't ruin that. Later he will tell them. Until then, he will cherish the peace while it lasts. A little white lie never hurt anyone before. Right? That wraps up this part. The next part should be up hopefully fairly soon, and that will be called Shattered Trust. Not going to lie, this might be my most suspenseful piece yet, and I do hope you enjoy this. Thank you so much for watching. As always, if you'd like to be kept up to date, check out any of my social medias. I hope that you all have a wonderful day or evening.